There is, they say the walking in nature, especially in the forest, there is a
Yeah, that's
part.
probably that's actually what we do where I live in Sweden. We walk in the forest, at least I do, and that's a very, very good coping mechanisms, I think.
What do you think about, have you ever heard of things like the Wim Hof method? I'm not sure. Breathing exercises, different kind of breathing exercises where you alter the rhythm or the depth of your breath.
Mhm.
In fact, in essence, I would say you create oxygen deficit. You train yourself not breathing so that your oxygen uptake becomes better as a result, basically,
Mhm.
and the usage of oxygen that you take up. And he says that through different breathing exercises, basically you oxygenate at the cell level better because of this.
No, I mean, it's you could probably, I mean, if you expose yourselves to hypoxia, you will induce these hypoxia inducible factors and so on, maybe get more capillary. I don't know if you can do that just by breathing exercises or if it needs something tougher than that, but I mean, it's and that's of course also related to these sympathetic parasympathetic systems. Yeah.
Do you think that coming back a little bit to exercise, is it always a good coping strategy? So could you imagine for example, a person is really stressed. They are exercising in a fasted state because let's say they can only work out in the morning and or go for a run or do these things, and then they are really stressed at work, and they're at home, they are stressed, and then okay, now I'm gonna exercise, and as we talked about the physiological mechanisms behind stress, and then now they are in a fasted state as well, and they want to exercise on top of it. Could this
No, I
backfire?
mean, it's probably not good if you, I mean, if you have so many things to do or you have so little time that you force yourself to exercise. I mean, then you could feel stressed
Just because
even just because you're gonna, at least before you, I mean, you're gonna be stressed when you're out there running is probably quite good to you perhaps, but you could be stressed before because you think I'm not gonna have time to do this exercise, and then I'm gonna be sick and get heart disease or whatever, so I have to do this, and then so then it would probably be better to relax a bit.
and talking about relaxation, what do you think of meditation or as a coping strategy?
What did you say? Meditation?
Meditation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Mm.
Really, I have never tried it myself, and I mean, could probably be good to calm you down. That must be maybe some kind of cognitive coping mechanism.
Right, right.
Yeah.
For example, we talked a lot about coping mechanisms, what we can do, but also I think we need to mention food, because food is a source of stress. Also, a lot of people use food to cope, of course, which can backfire really badly sometimes. But there is, I think, a very interesting new research. Well, not just one more coming out on microRNAs and for example, food as animals that have been raised in a stressful environment, and that can affect us via these microRNAs. And is there, you think, a plausible relationship between our stress resilience and the food we eat? Beyond
Yeah,
the obvious, what is inflammatory foods and sugars and beyond that. I mean,
definitely food could have effects on stress resilience, but I find it a little bit hard to think that microRNAs from the animals should be transferred to us. I mean, they go through the digestion and I find that a little bit hard. Some people think you get growth hormone from if you eat salmon with extra growth hormone, which is of course not possible because growth hormone is a protein which will be broken down in there. So it's a little bit the same thing. I don't really think so. But of course, I mean, if you don't eat a nutritious food, and if you that would also affect your homeostasis and could have effects on your stress resilience. That's of course true. And you have also have this with different amino acid composition of your food that could affect. I'm thinking mainly of the serotonergic system in the brain, then, which is serotonin synthesis is actually restricted by tryptophan availability. And that's also affected by the other amino acids because of competitions for uptake to the brain. So there are, of course, mechanisms that could explain that, depending on what you're eating, that would have effects on how you respond in different situations.
And of course, for example, stress can affect your ability to absorb certain nutrients. And then from then on, there could be a cascade of things happening. So if you don't absorb those nutrients, then your responses will be different because you don't have them simply in your body, right? Even though you ate them, you thought you took them in, but you're unable to absorb. Now, the other thing is, what do you think of fasting as a possible coping, healing mechanism in general?
I don't know if I think it. I mean, if you're fasting, of course, if we look evolutionary at these things, if we go back in evolutionary history, we were probably not eating like we're doing now, constant food intake, much more than we need, most of us.
Right.
Instead, we were probably eating a lot sometimes when we had the opportunity, and then we had to survive on much less for quite a period. So we're probably made for having different access to food over time and not this constant high level of high energy food. But at the same time, fasting is I can't really see why it should be good for you to do real fasting. I mean, if you start to run on lipolysis, you create ketones in your body. That's not a healthy situation either. So
Yes, comes my next question: ketogenic diets.
yeah, I don't know so much about that either. I mean, when I was young, it was very popular to do this fasting. That was in late 70s, early 80s. I remember me and my wife, we were not married at that time, I think she was my girlfriend, we did this. We could buy this package of that you were supposed to eat over a week. So it was mainly, you started out with some fruit juice, and then for 5-6 days you were almost only drinking water, and then you started up slowly again, or you were supposed to do. I managed quite well. My wife, she couldn't even get out of the bed in the morning. I had to give her a piece of sugar so she could stand up. But I mean, we got terribly sick after that. We got the flu, both of us, that we hadn't had for many years and haven't had now either. So probably our immune system was quite depressed.
So you did have an experience.
So, that's just my personal experience of fasting. I never tried it again. But I was dreaming about food. I was dreaming about herring, and so when it was all done, I went out and bought lots of good wine and good food, and we had a huge dinner. It was probably not so good either. But
well, like you said, probably in the olden days before all the civilization came into play, then that's exactly how it happened. People not eating for a long time and then feasting when they had the opportunity. So
yeah. So I mean, there's been a lot of this now, that you should have 1 or 2 days a week when you don't eat, and then, or you eat much less. And I mean, it's hard. I'm not a nutritionist, but to me, that sounds maybe more like it could have been back in the really old days when we were out hunting and gathering, and sometimes we found all of this good food, and then we had to walk around for a couple of days to find the next good spot. And
exactly, because I am a dietitian or training to be a dietitian, and we learn the importance of small frequent meals. But of course we have to ask questions, I think, because like we just discussed, evolutionary, physiology says that this has not always been the case. So therefore, I can't imagine our ancestors having access to 6 small meals a day spread out evenly, that sort of thing. So I'm not exactly sure that this is always the right thing to do in a healthy individual, right? Maybe sometimes there should be that. Sometimes we should do exactly these things to achieve optimal health. But basically, do you think that, for example, the ketogenic diets we mentioned briefly, which is based on basically so that there will be ketones used for fuel, because you lack, of course, glucose, and keeping it insulin levels at a stable level, which is, of course, a good thing in itself. But how do you think that affects our ability to cope? And then also, again, because we're coming back a circle to stress.
That's a hard question for me to answer, but to generate ketones, I can't really see why that. I mean, that's what we do when we have to, because we have a lack of sugar. And I know there is all this discussion now that you should not eat any carbohydrates or very low carbohydrates, and you should eat protein and fat and things.
Yeah.
To me, that I mean, I'm not a nutritionist, so I'm not an expert at all here, but it doesn't, as a biologist, to me, it doesn't sound, it sounds strange, because I mean, if you're going to work, carbohydrate is a very good fuel. So I mean, it's definitely not good to eat too much carbohydrates. That's definitely bad for you. But I mean, if you're out exercising and so on, I can't see why you shouldn't eat carbohydrates to a certain level, because it's much better to run your muscles on carbohydrates than to try to run them on protein, for instance, because you have to get rid of the ammonia all the time. And
that's exactly the one last question would be that there's a lot of diets nowadays that emphasize the importance of protein, especially in disease, for example. So like, people have to have protein because so that the catabolic processes, to counteract the catabolic processes. However, there has been studies showing that protein intake of over 20% is actually harmful, probably because, like you say, the generation of ammonia and these reactive substances.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take care of that ammonia and make urea from it, but still it would be, your kidneys will have a harder time to get rid of all this. So no, I can't see that. I mean, proteins are important for you to build your tissues, but to use proteins as an energy substrate, to me, that doesn't sound like a good... You should use fat is an excellent energy substrate, and carbohydrate is another excellent energy substrate. But to burn proteins, I don't really believe in that.
No, correct. I agree. I think that is a really, really dangerous, actually, in a way, idea that some people are promoting, because like I say, I think that there is only detrimental effects on the body after you start burning these proteins. Well, I think that's the end of my questions. So
Okay.
I would like to thank you very much for your participation. It was very enlightening. I think we discussed a lot of important and topics that were very interesting also. And then your research sounds absolutely fascinating, by the way.
Thank you.
And I hope that you will find what you're looking for, and then we will be able to read about it soon.
We hope so. And thank you. It was really interesting discussion. I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.